Chandler, give us your starting grid light sequence. Do it as loud as you can.
Beep, beep, beep. I can't.
That's not loud enough. That's a fucking 10-second penalty plus a drive-through.
Yeah, all right.
What do you want me to do?
That was terrible.
Welcome back, everyone, to Figuring Out the Formula. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Chandler and Patrick, as always. The current situation is this. Chandler is sitting on a deflating air mattress as we speak. Patrick is in...
Not deflating.
If we see you slowly go down, that's what's happening. Patrick is in a new apartment, so if it echoes, there's two Pats today. Just pretend like it's not a reverb. I'm mourning the death of the great Jimmy Buffett. I decided to wear my Island shirt in remembrance of him. And even though it's not his drink, I decided to pay tribute by drinking Kenny Chesney's rum, Blue Chair Bay. Cheers, boys. Straight out of the bottle, Island time.
Salud.
Man, that is delicioso. So this is going to be a short episode, right? This Italian Grand Prix, there was some action to it, but in all honesty, it didn't happen until the race, part of the race weekend. There was a major update, however, regarding the Mercedes drivers. So George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, they actually signed a 2-year contract extension with Mercedes. So, Pat, are you ready to see Lewis move on to bigger and better things? Like Tom Brady moved on to Delta today to become a team player or some shit like that? Or are you excited that he's going to remain in the sport?
Honestly, I'm glad that he's staying. Just having world-class drivers out there, it's always something good to see, because I feel like a lot of the younger generations, you don't have kind of how Lewis and Alonso had when they were coming up, where it's, you have Seb, Alonso, Kimi, Michael Schumacher, just all these world-class talents all at the same time. As I really think there's a big kind of changing of generations of drivers right now. And so having super experienced drivers like Lewis or Alonso on the grid is always a good thing in my eyes.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also think that it allows George Russell to grow even more than he has, right? Like in previous years, he's had a top team. His car has been in the top team. This year, they're kind of the top 3, right? Well, I think having another year under Lewis Hamilton is going to be so beneficial to him and his racecraft. Chandler,
I mean, look, my thing about George is maybe Lewis will teach him to just not be a little bitch,
Well, like father, like son, right? I mean,
he's got 2 more years.
Yeah, that is fair. 2 years can fly by like that, though, especially if you look at Checo, is he going to be here 2 more years like he's signed for? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Chan, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's good to have someone like Lewis in the sport. My only wish is that I wish that we could see I wish we knew that Mercedes would be in a more competitive car, because who's to say that we're sitting here 2 years from now and Mercedes is middle of the pack and isn't, like, at that point, are we getting to a point where it's like, okay, we're experiencing the F1 gets to experience the Michael Jordan on the Wizards versus, was it a waste of time?
Better than Michael Jordan playing baseball.
Yeah, that's true.
Imagine George Russell comes over and drives for Project 91 at Trackhouse Racing in NASCAR in the Cup Series.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Jimmy did it.
He was going to go full Sacha Baron Cohen from Talladega Nights, but but no, I think it's good to have them in the sport, and them as a team's a pretty good duo, I'd like to think. But again, if Mercedes has a crap car, then it's kind of all for a waste, in my opinion. But, like I said, for now, it's good to see Lewis is staying. Because also on top of that, I don't really know, had Lewis signed for somewhere else I
No.
don't know if I would have liked to see the shakeup that would have happened. So I'd rather have him stay than see any other shakeup or him just leave the sport in general.
There's no shot Lewis drives for anyone else. I think I mean, he's got all the money, right? Like
Yeah.
he's one of the highest
Yeah.
paid drivers consistently throughout his career. So, and your legacy is with Merck. So why change that? Um, in my opinion, I think that it's a great extension for Mercedes, right? Like I'm pretty sure that Lewis got a pay cut compared to his last contract, but that's because they were winning championships when he was last signed. So it's understandable. But this was really the only major stuff that happened, during the practice session of this race weekend, right? There really wasn't a whole lot of drama. Silly season, we recorded it. This will be 2 episodes ago. Shit still hasn't gotten silly yet. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but hopefully by our next episode, we have some more news to break on contracts and that kind of thing. Moving into the qualifying session in this race weekend, we talked earlier in the season, one of the qualifying sessions was set up like Q1 was hard tires, Q2 was medium, Q3 was soft. Well, that same setup came to the Italian Grand Prix this past weekend. So I loved it. We've discussed our opinions on this in another episode, but honestly, I was happy to see that it came back. You can see in the way the results are set up that I'm about to explain how it really does kind of take away some of the competitive advantages from the upper teams. Starting in Q1, like I said, we started with hard tires. So teams are only allowed to use hard tires. You can use as many sets as you want as hard tires, but you have to use hard tires. So out in Q1, you had Lance Stroll, Magnussen, Ocon, Gasly, and Zhou. There really wasn't a whole lot. I mean, you could say Stroll, but he's really not performed, at the same level as his teammate Fernando Alonso has. But it's really no shakeup in Q1, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
only thing that I'll say is that, and this really isn't as much of a surprise because we saw it last week in Zandvoort. But again, both Williams making it out of Q1. So, maybe that was a surprise before the summer break, but maybe it's the norm afterwards. So, again, good to see some progress potentially on the Williams side of things, even with the new, I say new, we've seen it before, but the modified qualifying setup.
I mean, just because we've seen it once doesn't mean that it's not a bad setup, right? Like, Pat, I know throughout this whole season, we've talked about like unfavorable changes that the FIA has created. I think my favorite, or I guess in this case, my least favorite change that they've created is the sprint shootout format, right? Like it used to be qualifying to a sprint. Sprint was basically qualifying for the race. Well, I love this change. This whole like hard, medium, soft. I love it. Now,
Yeah, I definitely like it too. I do think it, because teams also by default have less tires throughout the weekend, they have to be a lot more strategic about what they're doing. And so it's not just, we'll just burn through all these tires we don't feel like using in qualifying and we'll just use them for practice or whatever. Like you have to be a lot more strategic. And it definitely introduces a lot more competitiveness because, just starting in Q1, hard tires aren't going to warm up nearly as fast as soft tires. And so when you have a car that really can't adapt to that, and if a driver can't just get the tires to that optimal temperature, they're going to be out far sooner rather than later.
And if you think about it, like it's more race day like conditions, right? Like
Exactly.
you only get one lap to warm your medium or soft tires at the start of a Grand Prix because most people don't start on hards. The majority of people do not. So like you get your formation lap to warm up your tires. If you don't do it at the right time or at the right temperature, whatever it might be, then your race is pretty much screwed from the get-go.
Exactly.
So I think this is a good comparison to putting on the hard tires for the Q1. Moving into Q2 though, Chandler, we moved right from the hard tires to medium tires. So I don't remember which compound it was, but it was pretty much the middle of the field, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
It wasn't on the either extreme of them. It was either 2, 3, 4, or like 3, 4, 5. There's 6, I believe, but either way, there was at the very least there was one. There's either one set that wasn't used that was either softer than the softs, or there was one set that was used that was harder than hards. I can't remember which side of that spectrum they were on, but
yeah, either way, it was basically in the mid like range of the tire compound. Well, in Q2, no accidents. Crazy. We expect at least one kind of event, car to break down, something. Someone hits the wall, a gravel trap, whatever. We didn't get anything. No rain, nothing. Out in Q2, we had Bottas, Sargent, Hulkenberg, Liam Lawson, and Yuki Tsunoda. So I thought that was pretty impressive that both AlphaTauris barely missed Q3. I mean, within hundredths of a second. So to see both of them, and especially Liam Lawson. So Yuki is now a veteran. He's raced for more than 2 years in F1. To see Liam Lawson in his second ever race, his first ever dry qualifying, that was awesome to see that he almost made Q3.
Yeah, I mean, he's driving like he has something to prove,
And he does.
He knows that this is going to be his only chance. And while silly season hasn't really started, and some teams do just have automatic locks for who their drivers are going to be, you can really tell that he's definitely still fighting for a seat. And I mean, honestly, getting an AlphaTauri to P12 is pretty good in my book, at least.
Yeah, it's really good. Mm-hmm. And for your second race, like, are we kidding here? Like, it took Daniel Ricciardo coming in to wake Yuki Tsunoda up to actually push himself. Otherwise, he was just chilling in the back. And now that Liam Lawson's in, I think Yuki's really like, oh, fuck, I'm going to look like an idiot if this guy starts beating me. So to finish back to back, like in Q2, right next to each other, I think that's great for the team. And you can see already like the finishes from last race and, the qualifying efforts during the Italian Grand Prix. Like, this team is starting to wake up a little bit. It's too late in my opinion, but at least they're starting to wake up.
Yep.
Moving into Q3 though, we switched from the medium compound tires to the soft tires. This is where, the money is made, boys. This is where the drivers really show what they can do with the cars that they have. So yet again, another session where there were no.
I was trying to make it subtle. Damn it. Look, I have an empty beer bottle. I can tell I'm sinking down further, and I don't want to be sinking down further.
I was like, why did Kyle stop talking? I was like, did Kyle shit fuck up? And then I look over and Chandler's like
slowly just rising up. I'm sitting like this for the rest of the way.
Okay. Well, everyone, that was Chandler. As I predicted earlier in this podcast, that he would be sinking into his air mattress. Not all of us can have queen and king size beds. Chandler, buddy, you'll get there eventually.
Okay. That's why they're waiting. I got to wait till I get married before I get elevated to a real bed.
Yeah. And then on your 50th anniversary, you could get a box spring. Yeah. Anyways, like I was saying, so Q3, like, it really, nothing went on except for the last 2 minutes, right? So like if you didn't watch any of the qualifying, but you watched the last 2 minutes of Q3, Pat, what did the viewers get?
I mean, I was watching it with fucking pure electricity running through my veins. I mean, it was pretty much Crofty the entire time shouting, and so-and-so goes fastest, and so-and-so goes fastest, and so-and-so goes fastest. But what I really liked about it was that it really showed how much difference speed makes in F1. And that sounds very generic, but when you tell people, oh, they're a 10th faster or 2/10 faster, and it's like, oh, it's just a 1/10 of a second. What does that matter? Well, this showed you exactly why that matters. When you had Carlos, Max, and Charles Leclerc Carlos, he took pole for us. Max came in second, which probably furious inside. Who cares? And Charles Leclerc, they were within like 600th of a second of each other. I mean, it was absolutely unreal watching that close of margins to side qualifying.
And it didn't matter if you were, well, I guess it did. So, like we've said in the past, Pat is a Red Bull fan. Me and Chandler are McLaren fans. So we didn't have a dog in the fight. This was awesome to watch because it was back to like 2021, right? So it was Mercedes versus Red Bull. We were seeing all the action every session, all the time. Is it Lewis? Is it Max? Well, we finally got a taste of what could have been last year with Ferrari. I said it all the time. Ferrari had a chance to actually do something to compete for a championship against Max last year. They wasted that shit because of bad strategy. They didn't have very good reliability for their cars. I think that this was a taste of what they could do, right? Chandler, you had sent me a picture of the Ferrari. So there were two cars that had a special livery. The Ferrari actually had a special livery, and it's pretty historical. Some liked it, some didn't. Explain how this livery might have actually helped Carlos get pole position.
The livery that Ferrari rolled out, their home race, the Tifosi, was meant to honor so F1 adjacent, Le Mans 24 Hours Racing, big event in Le Mans, France. And Ferrari won for the first time in, I don't know the amount of years, but it was quite some time. Ferrari kind of got back on the winner circle of this race. And that's something, Ferrari's been in it for a long time. Go back and watch Matt Damon in Ford versus Ferrari. I mean, this was stuff back into the 60s that has been a historic race that Ferrari's been trying to win. So Ferrari made a special livery that was supposed to look like the car that won in Le Mans. So it's Ferrari red with a very yellowish. It's more yellow than gold.
Like a German yellow, right?
Yeah, and then thrown on top of that is that you have your Ferrari red, you have your German gold, and then you have the Ferrari black. The shark fin on the Ferrari car with this livery was so happened to be placed in the scheme of black, gold, red, which ironically is the German flag. Now, what is even funnier to me is if you zoom in, they have a little Italian flag sticker on the middle of the bottom center of the gold part of the flag. So many people saw it and were like, this is Ferrari's gonna Ferrari. Just an Italian car at their home race in Italy throwing a German flag on the back of their car. So thank goodness we got another car that is their home race, Alfa Romeo.
Who cares about them? We don't need to talk about them.
Alfa Romeo was a beautiful livery.
Hey, it was pretty fucking sick, bro.
It was
okay. All right, fine.
And Joe's helmet match. Oh my god, banger!
That's one of the better ones I've seen all season. So,
all right, talk about it. I didn't mean to interrupt. My apologies.
So, true to their Italian roots, they decided to put an Italian flag on the back of their car, and it was sleek. It was like the gloss, not the gloss, but it was shimmering, shiny. It was chrome. It was a chrome, the chrome Italian flag. There we go. See, I can talk my way through some stuff here.
There we go.
Just some like the
some
perfect
chef's kisses,
mozzarella on a perfect pie served up at the Temple B in Monza.
Bro, this man went to Olive Garden one time, and here we go. Tell me when.
Buddy had Chef Boyardee for the first time this
Chandler's
weekend.
over here like, give me more. It's amore. So I am glad that you gave us that explanation. So it was cool to see the Ferrari actually get pole for qualifying. I'm pretty sure Max was like, okay, I'm about to go demon mode on these people. Like you really think like this makes a fucking difference that both y'all are in the top? It doesn't. I'm that dude from the get. Like they awoke a sleeping giant, right? Like I think that there was a possibility that someone could have won against Max, right? Like I know I'm kind of spoiling what happened, but it's Max. There's a reason we don't pick him anymore, but
let's be honest. Max we've seen Max multiple times this year go from like seventh to first challenges and like ninth to first challenges. Like
and normally he does those in like, less than 5 laps, like it's too easy, it's too easy.
Exactly.
Well, the thing is, right, like we moved from qualifying where Carlos, like I said, got pole, then Max, and then Charles Leclerc. We move into the actual race part of the race weekend. Well, as Chandler slowly sinks into the air mattress, let's talk about another sinking feeling. Okay. Well, let's talk about another sinking feeling, Chandler. Yuki Tsunoda. He had a decent qualifying effort like we talked about. And just like your air mattress, the wind in his sails just poof, disappeared. On the formation lap, poor Yuki Tsunoda, he had engine failure and had to pull over. So this was in the middle of the formation lap, which caused an aborted start. So, Pat, let's take a pit stop, or better yet, instead of a pit stop, let's just abort the start. Let's jump into Pat's paddock and you describe what we saw after Yuki had his engine failure.
Okay, so welcome back to Pat's Paddock, everybody. So today we have a pretty unique thing we're going to talk about. So on the formation lap, as the drivers are coming around to the last set of turns, Yuki Tsunoda, his car just flat out died. He did try to pull over, but because there was really nowhere for them to even push the car out of the way, and they were going to have to bring a truck out to pick it up and tow it out. They had to stop the race start because that's obviously very unsafe. You can't have a driver like that, especially on lap 1 with a car just sitting right off the side of the road. So what we're going to talk about actually is the light sequences that F1 uses. Now, if you go online, the FIA has a whole booklet of all the different light combinations that they use. There's a gajillion of them because the big light boards, they have 20 different lights on them. And they all mean different things. But we're going to talk about the most common ones.
They had more lights than Electric Zoo did this past weekend.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's actually, it's pretty cool if you ever go to a track and go towards where the start finishes. Those light boards are actually pretty fucking massive. But whenever they're going to start a session that's, practice or qualifying, they'll start off just turning on 5 green lights. That just signals to all the drivers, track is clear, go ahead and start driving around. Before a race, you'll see a similar instance, but it's just 1 green light that's at the end of the pit lane entrance that just tells the driver the pit lane is open, take your cars to the grid so that we can make preparation for the race. If the session needs to be stopped during practice or qualifying or anything like that, you'll see all 5 red lights turn on the boards. All the drivers will come into the pits. They'll also be accompanied by the flags, which we've talked about a couple times. And then we'll also see, correction, that's 10 because there's 2 rows of lights. Now, before the race, you'll see the 10 red lights on, and then those actually act as kind of a timer reference. Even though, people have fucking watches, I guess this is some old school shit. And then 10 minutes before the formation lap, they'll knock out 2 lights, 5 minutes before 2 more lights. And then I think it goes to like 3 minutes, a minute, and then like 45 seconds or something like that, just to kind of tell people get off the grid. Now in this week's instance, we had a very unique circumstance where they used the orange lights. Now, the orange lights, these rarely get used. They're at the very top of the bar above the green and the red. And essentially, whenever there is an aborted start, they just turn on all those lights to signal to everybody that the start is aborted, and they tell the teams to come back out and, make sure their cars aren't just sitting there overheating. We heard Martin Brundle talk about that a lot. And then obviously, for everybody's favorite part of the race, they turn on all 5 lights and then they shut them off and the race begins.
All right, Chan, give us your best impression of the lights going off at the start of a Grand Prix. So just make the sound. Let's hear if you have what it takes. You didn't have what it takes for the Ferrari pit stop last episode. Let's hear if you. Well, okay.
Although, all right, I do have to give you some props. I don't know if it's give you some props, but I just want to let you know that my own fiance is on y'all's side on this one, and it very, very it's demoralizing to hear that.
Well,
you should try being better.
Well, he does. He has an opportunity at this moment in time in the podcast. Chandler, give us your starting grid light sequence. Do it as loud as you can.
Beep, beep, beep. I can't.
That's not loud enough. That's a fucking 10-second penalty plus a drive through.
Yeah, all right.
What do you want me to do?
That was terrible. No, sorry.
Whoa. Orange lights, aborted start. Let's do it again. All right. So we just did the formation. We just did the formation lap. So do the lights.
They don't make sounds. It's just the lights.
They do on Netflix.
They do. Yeah. Watch Drive to Survive, bro.
Netflix. They make sounds.
Okay. Well, do the Netflix sounds.
I can't. They're computerized. I am not a computer. I am a person. I am a human
Chandler.
being.
It's like a heartbeat. It's like
all right. For you followers,
bro.
All right, Pat, can you help us out here?
Look, okay, if you really want to feel what the lights sound like, even though they are lights and not sounds, just watch Drive to Survive. It's like doom 1, doom 2, doom 3, doom 4, doom 5, and then in the background you hear Crofty somewhere way in the fucking distance yelling, and it's lights out and away we go. And and then you do what Kyle's doing right now. Like
here you go.
Chandler, do you even watch F1?
Yeah, dude. What the This man
can't even hear that. We can't even hear that. We just hear your mattress deflating again.
This man is, Chandler is 0 for 2 in figuring out the formula challenges. Pat, thank you for recuperating something out of this. Let's go ahead and move on from this terrible start at the race, both literally at the Italian Grand Prix and in this race section of figuring out the formula. Chandler, if I were to tell you that it took 15 laps for Max to pass Carlos Sainz, do you really think that that would have happened? Or is that something you kind of expected after the qualifying efforts?
I would. 15's a stretch. The only reason that I would be somewhat plausible at Monza is because we've seen all season how powerful the Red Bull's DRS when they have that is. Monza, because Monza's so fast from the get-go, the DRS isn't as big of a factor in this. So it's a bit of a stretch still for me that it took 15 laps, but it's still kudos to Carlos and for being able to defend. Once you got to about like lap 12, you kind of knew it was coming, but for Carlos to stretch it out to 15, it's good defending on his part.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree.
Because at that point, 51 lap race, normally 52, but it's 51 lap race. You're looking at you're 30% of the race through that you're still held the lead. So that's some solid racing.
And that's the most he's led all season long, because Max has led them all basically. But the crazy part for me was, like you talked about, it was a little difficult to pass. But it seemed like the only way you could pass was if you just you took a shortcut on turn 1, turn 2. Like at turn 1 at the hairpin, you can literally just shoot, and you're supposed to give your spot back after you pass the driver. Well, his first driver, George Russell, he did not. He passed Esteban Ocon at the turn 1. He just didn't even try to make the corner. He just kept going. And I think it's pretty shitty because all he did was get a 5-second time penalty, right? It's hard to pass at this track. So if you don't do it cleanly, then you're going to be riding behind the guy for a while. And we'll see that later on in the race. But like the crazy part is only get a 5-second time penalty. Pat, during the TV production, they had the Mercedes communications director on, like talking with Crofty and Martin, like, and they were discussing like, why didn't you give the spot back to Esteban? He said that it was going to take more time to give the spot back than to just say, okay, you got me. I'll take my 5-second time penalty.
Yeah. So going into that first chicane, turns 1 and 2 at Monza. If you play F1 online, you're probably just going to get wrecked on the first lap. Sorry, pal. But this weekend we saw a lot of drivers that, they couldn't really figure out whether to go to the inside or the outside. And usually if they went on the outside, they were going off the track. Of which to me, I was kind of like, why are you all just being idiots? I mean, if you look at the track, it's far too small to fit 2 cars through there. Like, you're not actually going to pass somebody in the chicane unless the driver in front just makes some massive mistake. Which George, I mean, they're right. There's nothing preventing you from doing it. They have 2 sausage curbs that really aren't that bad.
You just jump it like the Duke boys. That's all you do.
Or like they have these like bollards that you're supposed to weave through if you go straight. But I mean, honestly, you can just drive right through it. The only driver I really saw that, really understood how to take that chicane this weekend was Lewis. And he would just close the gap and then follow them very closely through the chicane and then take them on the outside of turn 3. That was really the only way to do it. But I guess all the drivers just didn't think there was another way or another place in the fastest track on the calendar. And yeah, George, I mean, he got what he fucking deserved and it worked out for him somehow still.
Yeah. Just to see like, this whole season, there's been so much like focus on staying within the track limits. Well, I don't understand how using their runoff like that is not a penalty for track limits. Also, with not giving a spot back, right? Like, can they not double dip penalties? Like, I really think if it's a 15-second penalty, okay, George Russell is probably going to give that spot back. So
yeah, that is something that it also kind of varies because at that point, it's like there is intent to break the rules. It's not just, I missed the first turn and then couldn't make the second one. So I went outside track limits too much. This is, fuck you. I'm just going to cut the corner.
Chandler, what pissed me off about this whole thing was like the bitching that they all did, right? Like the ones who did miss the corner, they were just, he pushed me off. He didn't leave me room. It's like, no shit, Sherlock. Your car is there's only a room for like 1.5 cars. Chandler,
there is no room. It's not like he didn't leave me any room. Is guess what? He was there first. He gets claim to whatever he needs because there was no room for that. I mean, last time we saw, this is where we saw one of the most iconic and fortunate like near misses in Formula One where Max's car ended up on top of Lewis, like because of racing so hard. So I think people should know at this point that there's not room. There's the cars. Maybe there was room back whenever this was Ayrton Senna's day in the 80s when the cars were the size of a stick of bubble gum. But now that your car is bigger than a Ford F-150 Lariat riding around through there, you're not fitting 2 of them through there. Like it just.
Now a Chevy, oh baby, it'll just jump that curb. Oh
man, racing, baby.
Yes, sir. Speaking of rubbing his racing, as a McLaren fan, I really wish that that they would have just absolutely rubbed or destroyed the fuck out of this guy's race car. Alex Albon, hats off to you, buddy. Banger of a race. I mean, this dude. We'll talk a little bit later. He helped Pat. He destroyed me and Chandler. He ruined McLaren's race. So the McLarens could not pass him to save their life. Lewis came in with fresher tires and was able to pass him after a little while. But I mean, most of the race, he was just, he was 20 feet wide. Like this car was all over.
It's kind of funny because the reason that the Williams did, or I mean, I'm not a fucking scientist, but I think the reason Williams did so well here is because, like we talked about earlier in the season, how the underside of the car, it's just nothing. It's just flat. And so when you get a track like this, I mean, Alex's tires were pretty much shot to hell.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't even know how Lewis managed to get past him. Because he pretty much held up anybody else that was going to get past him in a Williams.
It's so frustrating, right? Like that's when like accidents start to happen when you're in a DRS train for fucking 35 laps. You're like, okay, I'm passing this guy or we're both going to be done. Well, on the way up to pass Albon, Lewis Hamilton was trying to pass the McLarens first. Well, the first McLaren he had to get to was Oscar Piastri. I don't even know what turn it was, but Chandler, he made a fucking terrible call. Turn 4. He made a terrible call to try to pass Oscar. And I mean, they had contact. I don't know how Oscar didn't have a flat tire. I didn't know how fucking Lewis Hamilton's car wasn't fucked up. Chandler, Oscar had wing damage. I mean, what are we doing?
It's a shame. And it goes back again to the Lewis. If you get a penalty for that, 5 seconds may drop you back 1 or 2 places behind somebody.
And he did get one.
Yeah,
just to clarify.
I didn't know if we were going to spoil, but he did get a 5-second penalty. But congrats, 5 seconds maybe drops you back 1, 2 spots at most. But look what it did to Oscar's race. He just killed a whole weekend worth of work.
Yeah, he was in the points, as was Lando Norris, and that contact made him come in a pit and get a wing change. So he was out of the points the rest of the race. In my opinion, Pat, I think that you need to get a pass-through penalty, right? So you have to come into the pits. I'm not saying you have to stop, but you have to go pit lane speed the entire way from entrance to exit. After that, hey, I think it's all square, right? Like, because if he hits Oscar and Oscar has to come in for a new wing, I think Lewis needs to come in as well. Yeah. Because he will lose basically just as many, if not very close to the same number of spots on the racetrack as Oscar did.
Yeah, I definitely, at first watching it in real time, I was kind of like, what the fuck are both of you doing? Like, there's a turn coming to you. I think what ended up happening is Lewis was just looking to his left, so focused on the turn already, he didn't realize he was actually drifting to the right into Oscar. And in my opinion, a 5-second penalty really,
it's fucked.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's got to be at least 10 seconds for something like that.
Even more than that, because it takes around, depending on the track, it takes around 25 seconds from start to finish during a pit cycle. Around, like I said, it depends on the track.
Yeah.
So to only give a 5 or 10 second penalty when this other guy has to go pit that you hit, like if you're deemed responsible for hitting someone, for causing a collision, your ass needs to have more time lost than the car that got hit. If they're out of the race, I'm not saying you have to retire, but there needs to be some sort of penalty.
Yeah, I mean, 5 seconds is definitely not enough. The problem then becomes, because like we discussed before, they penalize the action, not the result. Causing a collision, it doesn't always mean that a car is going to have to replace their front wing and stuff like that. It could just be you just push them off the track a little bit and then they're still behind you, but they haven't actually lost any places. Of which I'm hoping in the next few years, F1 can hire some legalese motherfucker and, get them to update the rule book for, various collision scenarios and things like that.
But we just did it for him.
I mean, proportionally,
pass through penalty.
That's right. But the problem is then, because you can start introducing like bias essentially from the stewards.
No. How? Yeah. If you give, instead of a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision, think about it like this. Think about it like this. In football, you can have 2 totally different games, and let's say there's a deep ball and one player gets pushed off, and then the refs throw pass interference in one and not the other. Then people are like, oh, well,
this is judgment here. Like, why are you so biased in this game? Why isn't there any consistency? And the FIA already struggles with consistency. And so it just needs a lot more thorough
I don't think you
review.
can compare apples to oranges in this scenario. I'm not saying that the penalty for causing a collision isn't subjective, because it is. It's not objective, right? Like, it changes all the time. But I think the penalty, like the actual punishment, needs to change from 5 seconds to a pass through. Like, if you barely push someone off the track, right? Like, there's no real damage, whatever, but you get penalized, you're going to get a 5-second time penalty at this point in time. So how's that any, like, that's a rare situation where there's no damage after a collision.
Here's something that I mean, just the thought off the top of my head after, we've discussed this before, is from the time that an incident's noted to then it goes to become investigated and then a decision is rendered, there's usually about 3 or 4 laps.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, and this is just me, and here I am sitting on an air mattress in a basement.
Slowly sinking, yeah.
But in that time frame, say, Oscar has to replace his wing. He's got to come around and come into pit spot or pit for that to replace wing. Give or take what, we've seen in F1, it's about 10 seconds to change a wing. So I feel like you can almost, because it's not an instant, you caused a collision, here's 5 seconds, or it's whatever, is that if the driver comes in those 2 to 3 laps afterwards and has to replace a wing, it should be a 10-second penalty. If it's just a simple pit stop, you got to change tires because you flat spotted it, 5 seconds. And if it's out of the race, maybe 15.
I hear what you're saying. I think that gets way too hard to police in that situation.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, like, right now it's across the board 5-second time penalty for causing a collision. We see that with Logan Sargent in the same race. A couple laps later, he caused a collision with Bottas. So, but they were both already out of the points. Like, it didn't matter at that moment in time for points, but to see Bottas, fall, I forgot how many places he fell, but to see him go down the list, down the running order, I don't think that's right. I think Logan Sargent needed to also go down the order as well. Whether that's, I think it really does have to be a pass through penalty, because 5 seconds when you're losing to the leader by a lap and a half, it doesn't make a bit of difference, but it does for the team, because you want to finish ahead of the guy who just fucking crashed you. Mm-hmm. The craziest part about this whole thing, now that we're off our soapboxes here about like penalties and the FIA being inconsistent as fuck, which I know we can all agree on that because they're garbage.
Nothing new that you haven't heard or hear before.
The thing that was new, Chandler, was Ferrari. So the Ferrari battles were amazing this race. The thing is, they weren't battling with anyone but themselves. Now, normally it's like team principal versus driver versus mechanics versus car. And it's like, Mortal Kombat, survival of the fittest, that kind of thing. Well, in this Italian Grand Prix, Pat, tell us exactly what was going on with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz.
So I know after the race, actually, when the media was interviewing Vasseur, he actually talked about it. He's like, you know what? He's like, I just wanted to put on a show for the Ferrari fans. So I, just let them race. And it was very fun to watch. It was definitely a very tight battle. I do think there really were some kind of marginal defensive moves going on between both drivers throughout the race, which I can attribute to them just feeling under a lot of pressure being at home, of which later in the year, we'll definitely talk more about kind of what actually is racing etiquette. But it was definitely very good, hard racing. It was very entertaining. While, like I said, I think there were some questionable incidents where one of the drivers could have been penalized. By the end of it, I mean, they both would have had crazy penalties. So it's really nothing burger. Yeah.
I think you made a great point, though.
Like Esteban Ocon time sheet.
Yeah. I think you made a great point, though, Pat. They were racing for something important here, right? Like, this is their home race, but they were also racing for a podium. So they're racing for third place because at this moment in time, it was Max Verstappen obviously leading the race, and then Checo Perez, he was in second. So racing for third place, they were like Martin and all those guys like on TV, they were like, are they going to let him keep doing it? Because it was getting hairy, like you were saying. Chandler, there was even one moment where Charles Leclerc, he locked up his brakes so bad. He came this close to showing Carlos Sainz what a Moroccan shake is.
he did. I mean, like I said, it got a little hairy, and you think about it too, is that yes, Fred Vasseur, you can sit back after the race whenever nobody crashes and say, yeah, we were putting on a show. What happens if
they both wreck?
Leclerc's flat spots locks up right into the rear end, and then you get a double DNF. Just ruins the day. He's not sitting there saying, well, we wanted to put on a show, and
no, he's in the fucking bread line with Otmar. That's what he's doing.
Yes.
Like, dude, you already have a German flag on your car. If you're not going to provide the results that this team, how are you any different than Mattia Binotto? You know what I mean? So to see them battling, I loved it. I was really hoping they would both take each other out, as well as Lewis Hamilton further on in the field. That didn't happen. It ended up being to finish out the race, Max Verstappen won. Then you had Checo in second, and then Carlos Sainz actually held off Charles Leclerc to finish on the podium. So it was a great ending to what was a pretty great race. It was a little weird at first, like we said, with the aborted start and all that, but it did pan out. There weren't any like major wrecks, nothing crazy, but it was a racer's race, if that makes sense. This Max Verstappen win, though, was very significant. Pat, it was Max's 10th win of the season. So as a Red Bull fan, quickly, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, he took the record for another Red Bull car, which I fucking love Seb. But Max is just too dominant, I mean, was thinking today about we talked about it a couple weeks ago about how if Red Bull didn't fuck up in Brazil last year, they would have won the last 20 odd races or something ridiculous like that. And who knows? I mean, I have a feeling they've got to slip up somewhere, but the way Max is going, he really could win all the races, like the rest of the races. And
I'm not going to go that far. I think he could. Right?
That's what I'm saying. I think he could.
But to say nothing is going to happen, eventually towards the end of the season. Well, towards the end of the season, every driver takes grid penalties.
Yes.
Because they have more equipment that they're using and stuff like that. Eventually, I mean, it took him 15 laps to get to first this race. Who knows if he's starting from 11th? Maybe it takes 20. I don't know, but
who's to say? Because there's theoretically a possibility. If I'm not mistaken, Max theoretically can lock this championship up in Singapore, correct? Or is it? If it's not Singapore, it's Japan.
It's one of the two,
which is insane.
Yes, which he almost locked it up in Japan last year. I think he technically did.
He did.
Yeah. It was like a half-point race or whatever. But
the awkward ass interview.
But to sit there and say that nothing's going to happen, who's to say that after he's set the record for most consecutive wins, I'm sure he's not far from the most wins in a single season. So who's to say that? I'm not going to say the motivation falls off, but maybe the priorities of all right, you know what? I think Max will realize that Checo is probably the best number 2 driver he's ever going to get, because everybody else is going to try and usurp him from number 1, whereas Checo is second in the point standings, but not a threat. So maybe it's, hey, I've already locked this thing up. We'll fight for you for a change.
I think it's more so that you broke the glass ceiling, right? Like whenever you become champion, it's I'm not gonna say it's easier to get your second and third, whatever, but there's a lot less pressure because you've already got it, if that makes sense. What's just as crazy as Max getting his 10th win is Red Bull has its 15th consecutive win. So Pat discussed a little bit, like this would have been the 20-something straight win if they had won last season in Brazil. They didn't, but 15 is still fucking nuts. Pat, the thing that amazes me the most is that Adrian Newey doesn't have his own building like Bryant Denny Stadium or like this dude needs like what is a soccer pitch
like a
or
car
something
factory?
in Austria.
I don't know.
Yeah, something, dude. It's crazy.
I mean, he's super impressive. For those of you that don't know, Adrian Newey, while he's been designing Red Bull cars for damn near their whole existence, he previously was consistently winning at McLaren and consistently winning at Williams as well. Like, I mean, on his own, I think he has like 13 championships or some shit. He's the fucking Bill Russell of F1. And who knows how many more he's going to win. And while I personally also I kind of get bored sometimes watching us just fucking win everything by a mile. By the flip side, it's like you're witnessing fucking greatness right now.
A dynasty. It's literally a dynasty. Speaking of dynasty, when you think of a dynasty, you think of superstars. You think of athletes that can do and buy and say whatever they want, right? You might think of the glitz and glamour of like the fame and fortune. Well, with fame and fortune for racing drivers like Carlos Sainz, you have nothing but watches, right? So Richard Mille is a watch brand that extremely expensive watches.
Mm-hmm.
Chandler, the driver of the day, Carlos Sainz, was robbed right after the Italian Grand Prix. They stole his $500,000 Richard Mille watch. And you know what this guy did? He chased him.
I was about to say he went again. Second reference in the night. He went Sacha Baron Cohen in Talladega Nights. He got out of that car and chased a man on foot.
Yeah, I mean, he had the old Jerusalem cruisers going, just the old two steps. You know what I mean? He was getting after it, and not only did he get after it, he caught the dude. So
and then turned him into the police.
Yeah, rat. Whatever. Anyways, or El Rato.
Fucking
or
snitch.
I don't know how you say it in Italian.
El Rata.
But just, Rata. The current point situation. Why don't you, Chandler, let us know how everyone's doing in points? Just give us a gist of like, I know the middle section, like the mid pack is very, very tight right now.
Yeah. So first and second, Max and Checo pretty split off from each other, split off from the rest of the field. Third place is Fernando at 170 points. Let me make sure I got this right on that. 170 points for Fernando. But right behind him is Lewis at 164. So 6 points. That's a second place finish for Lewis and a second place finish for Fernando. Lewis flip-flops that. So pretty tight race there for third and fourth. Looking on down where you really get in the midfield, our boy, the community patrol, Carlos Sainz, neighborhood watch, pun intended that time.
Neighborhood watch.
Yeah, there it is. I was looking for it. He is in fifth place with 117 points, and Charles Leclerc, his teammate, at 111 points. So hence, again, a little wrinkle to the fold of the hard racing they were doing on Sunday. It matters in terms of finishing, who's going to finish among the best of those teammates. But then not to count out that. Go ahead.
So basically what you're saying for like Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc that, only time will tell.
That's right. That's right. That's really all we can do is just, keep looking at our timepieces and keep Richard milling around and see what happens at the end of the season.
I hate us so much. I hate us so much. All right. Anyways, keep going, please.
Yeah. So not just that, but, if you look back at looking at the Rolexes, and you got George Russell right behind you at 109. So the battle for fifth place is an 8-point difference between 3 drivers. So that is, who's to say that will we see the 2 Ferraris work together to distance themselves from George and then duke it out later at the end? Or are we going to see the 2 Ferraris battling each other to try and just beat each other on it? And then George happened to be like, see, you wouldn't want to be, y'all keep fighting with each other. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, no, it definitely will. And we're going to keep you guys updated on that. But you're talking about them duking it out. Well, the 3 of us, I mean, this was a battle between the 3 of us. Granted, we weren't doing anything but sitting on our couch, drinking and watching this race. But the predictions from last episode for the Italian Grand Prix were as follows. Pat, you chose Lewis Hamilton. You chose him 2 weeks in a row. I think it was a cop-out because you couldn't actually come up with a name. Because Chandler, you picked first last week and you chose Fernando Alonso. Again, same thing. Shitty pick, whatever. I chose Lando Norris and still a shitty pick. So, Pat, fuck, you won. You got first place.
I mean, look, you did, bro. You took my pick.
Got first place with a 6th place. Let's just go ahead and say that none of us had good picks this week.
That is fair. That is 100% fair. We all sucked this week, but Alex Albon, you fucking ruined it.
I love you. If you ever listen to this podcast, Alex, I love you.
If you listen to this podcast, then I love you too. But the real issue was like the McLarens, like we said, could not pass Lewis, and you were able to get past. Well, okay, Lewis was able to get past him, not you. But that actually set you up for the prize pick, the lottery pick here for the Singapore Grand Prix that comes up in a couple weeks. So for that race, who are you choosing to finish highest?
I am going to go square as fuck. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be square, and I'm going to take Checo.
Fuck me, dude.
Streets, there
All
it
right.
is.
That's square as shit. I am not going to be around.
So I think that was a good pick. And I'm not going to, I get to go second because I picked Lando. Lando finished ahead of Fernando. Well, I think Chandler's going to get mad at me because I'm pretty sure he wants to do it 3 times in a row. I'm actually going to go ahead and pick Fernando Alonso to finish highest at the Singapore Grand Prix.
Okay, so Chandler, that's spicy. I like that.
Chandler, since you suck and you're the loser of the Italian Grand Prix, finishing last, who is your choice for the Singapore Grand Prix?
Look, y'all took the 2 best picks, not named Max. I mean, I might as well just draw a name out of the hat from the other 17 drivers and just go. But I'm going to go with a Ferrari that has had some sort of resurgent, and we'll just go with Charles Leclerc, didn't get my watch robbed off me, and yeah. That's what we'll go with. Like I said, y'all have got the 2 chalk picks. That's what I get for finishing last in Italy. I should have just, what they say, do better. Like,
I've never heard someone with as little confidence as you have in that pick ever before.
I mean, I was pretty bad last week. I was ready to give up.
Luckily, I cut a lot of that shit out, and I will for you too, Chandler. But my God, that was no confidence at all.
Like I'm telling you, I still had like the top 10 just from whenever we were discussing that of where our drivers finished, and I see Valtteri at 10th place, and I'm gonna
just say this: I do think Lando is a sleeper next week,
and he very well could be. I don't know. I think Fernando did really good in the Dutch Grand Prix, so we'll see. I know it's 2 different tracks, but he needs something to go. But yeah, so those are our predictions for the Singapore Grand Prix. That's in a couple weeks, so we will have next week off. There won't be a podcast or anything like that. Y'all pray for Chandler and his air mattress.